The sky above Vector 7 burned with fire and light as the dominion of Scar descended upon the small colony world. Marcus stood in the communications center, a converted storage building where engineers had rigged together equipment from both human and Kethrali technology. And he watched the battle unfold on screens that showed views from orbit. The Obsidian Guard fought with a ferocity that took his breath away, their ships dancing through enemy formations like shadows made of crystal and death. And for every Kethrali vessel, there were 5 Scar warships trying to destroy it. Commander Vrethal led the defense from the flagship, barking orders in that clicking language while human technicians relayed information about enemy positions and colony defenses. 3 enemy ships coming in from the east, Marcus called out, reading the sensor data as fast as he could. They are trying to flank the Guardian formation. Vrethal's voice crackled through the speakers. Acknowledged, Deathbearer, redirecting Blade Squadron to intercept. Marcus had not slept in 2 days, surviving on water and determination, but he refused to leave his post even when his mother begged him to rest. These warriors came here for me, he told her with tired but steady eyes. I will not abandon them. All across the colony, humans worked alongside Kethrali in ways that had never been seen before in all the long history of the galaxy. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, the colony's chief medical officer, had learned more about alien biology in 2 days than most researchers learned in a lifetime. And now she worked frantically to save wounded Kethrali warriors who were carried into her improvised hospital. The carapace is cracked here, she explained to her human nurses. We need to apply the bonding agent carefully, or the infection will spread. Chief Engineer Wong had figured out how to interface human power systems with Kethrali shield generators, and his team worked around the clock to keep the energy flowing to the defensive batteries. Children ran through the chaos, carrying blankets and water to exhausted warriors, their small faces determined and brave despite the terror that filled the sky above them. The Kethrali had never experienced anything like this. For 10,000 years they had fought their battles alone, proud and isolated, asking nothing from other species and receiving nothing in return. But here on this small world, these fragile creatures who lived such brief lives were giving everything they had to help strangers. A warrior named Krelvex stumbled into the medical center with a wound that would have been fatal without treatment. And as Dr. Okonkwo worked to save his life, he stared at her with confused wonder. Why do you help me? He asked in halting human speech. You do not know me. You owe me nothing. The doctor smiled despite her exhaustion and fear. Because you need help, she said simply, and that is enough. On the battlefield above, the Obsidian Guard was being slowly overwhelmed. For every Scar ship they destroyed, 3 more took its place, and the defensive line was beginning to crack under the relentless assault. Vrethal knew that the end was approaching, that soon the enemy would break through and descend upon the colony to finish what they had started. All units prepare for final stand, the commander ordered. We will make them pay for every inch of ground. Marcus heard this order and felt tears streaming down his face, knowing that these magnificent warriors were about to die because of him, because of a blanket given on a cold night. Then something happened that nobody expected. The sensors detected new contacts, hundreds of them, thousands of them, emerging from hyperspace in a vast wave that blotted out the stars. Marcus stared at the screen in disbelief, certain that more Scar reinforcements had arrived to ensure the colony's destruction. But the ships were not Scar. They flew crystalline banners that shimmered with all the colors of the rainbow, and their hulls were marked with symbols that made Vrethil cry out in shock and joy. The High Fleet, the commander shouted. The Scion has sent the High Fleet. Thousands of Kethrali warships fell upon the Scar invasion force like a tsunami crashing against rocks. And suddenly, the battle that had seemed lost became a massacre of the enemy. Marcus watched the screens with wide eyes as the Scar fleet was torn apart, ship after ship exploding into fire and debris, the overwhelming force that had threatened to destroy them all now fleeing in panic. Within an hour, it was over. The Scar were gone, those that survived running back to their territory with the Hive fleet in pursuit, and the sky above Vector 7 grew quiet once more. Commander Vretha's ship landed outside the colony, and when the great warrior emerged, Marcus ran to meet the commander despite his exhaustion. "How?" he asked breathlessly. "How did they know to come?" Vrethal knelt before the boy, and Marcus could see that the commander was wounded. Dark fluid leaking from cracks in that beautiful armor. "The Science sent word of what happened here," Vrethal explained. "How humans gave shelter to our wounded, how they fed our warriors and healed their injuries, how children brought blankets to keep us warm." The commander's voice broke with emotion. "In 10,000 years, no species has ever stood beside us in battle," Vrethal said. "No one has ever offered to help without being asked. And when the Scion heard what your people had done, the air called upon all the forces of our empire." Marcus looked up at the sky where the great Kethrali fleet hung like jewels against the darkness. "All of that," he whispered, "because we helped?" "All of that," Vrethal confirmed. "Because you showed us that kindness is not weakness, that compassion is not foolishness, that the greatest strength in the universe is the willingness to give without counting the cost." A new transmission came through the communication system, a voice that Marcus had heard before in his dreams. "Death Bearer," the Scion said, and Marcus could hear warmth and gratitude in every click and chirp of that alien speech. "You saved my life with a blanket, and your people saved my warriors with their hands and hearts. There is no debt we can ever fully repay." Governor Vasquez stepped forward, her face streaked with dust and tears. "What happens now?" she asked. "Will you leave and return to your empire?" There was a pause before the Scion answered. "The Kethrali Council has made a decision," the heir announced. "From this day forward, humanity is declared Keltharam bound, eternal friends of our people, protected by sacred law for as long as our civilization endures." The colonists who had gathered to hear this announcement began to cry and cheer and embrace each other. "We have traveled the stars for 10,000 years, the Scion continued, and we have found many species, some that were strong and some that were wise, and some that were ancient beyond counting. But we have never found anything as powerful as what we discovered on Vector 7. Vrethal translated the next words with something like reverence in that alien voice. "You are small and fragile, and you live such brief lives on harsh worlds," the Scion said, "and still, you give your blankets to strangers in the cold." Marcus thought about his father, about the lessons he had learned about kindness and compassion and helping those in need. He thought about the creature he had found on that freezing night, shivering and afraid and alone. He thought about the blanket that had started everything, the precious gift from his father that he had given away without a second thought. And he smiled. His father had been right all along. Help comes first and questions come later. The universe is vast and cold and full of dangers that humans can barely comprehend, but it is also full of possibilities, full of connections waiting to be made, full of friendships waiting to be born. All it takes is the courage to be kind. Marcus Chen, 12 years old, went back to working in the hydroponic gardens the next day. But he never slept cold again, and neither did anyone on Vector 7, because they had learned the most important lesson in all the universe. Kindness is not weakness. Kindness is the most powerful force that exists. And one blanket, given freely on a cold night, can change the fate of civilizations. Marcus walked through the colony gates with Governor Vasquez beside him, and his heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. Before them stretched a plain of rocky ground where the alien ships had landed, and now Marcus could see figures emerging from the vessels. Tall beings that moved with a grace and power that made him feel very small and very young. They were the same species as the creature he had saved, he realized, but these were not wounded or frightened or huddled against the cold. These were warriors. Each one stood at least 7 feet tall, their bodies covered in dark chitinous armor that seemed to grow from their very skin, and their crystalline wings caught the light of the sun and scattered it into rainbows that danced across the ground. They carried weapons that hummed with contained energy, blades and staffs and devices that Marcus could not even begin to understand, and every movement they made spoke of deadly skill and ancient discipline. 100 of them formed a line between the ships and the colony, standing in perfect formation, like statues carved from living darkness and light. "Stay calm," Governor Vasquez whispered to Marcus, though her own voice shook slightly. "Let me do the talking." But before she could say anything else, the warriors began to move. They parted in the center of their formation, creating a path through which walked the largest and most magnificent of their kind. This one wore armor of deep purple that shimmered like oil on water, and its crystalline wings were shot through with veins of gold that pulsed with inner fire. It approached Marcus and the governor with steps that made the ground tremble, and when it stopped before them, it towered over the humans like a mountain over mice. Then it did something that made everyone watching gasp in disbelief. The great warrior knelt. It lowered itself to the ground before Marcus, bowing its head until the boy could have reached out and touched the gleaming surface of its helmet. "I am Commander Vrethel of the Obsidian Guard," the warrior said, its voice clicking and chittering but somehow forming words that Marcus could understand. "And I greet the debt-bearer with all the honor of my people." Marcus stared at the kneeling giant, unable to believe what was happening. "I do not understand," he managed to say, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Why are you bowing to me?" Commander Vrethel raised its multifaceted eyes to meet the boy's gaze, and Marcus saw something unexpected in those alien depths. He saw respect. "You saved the Scion," Vrethel explained, rising slowly to its full height, "the heir to the throne of the Kethrali Empire, the most precious being among all our people." "The creature I found," Marcus breathed, understanding beginning to dawn in his mind. "That was your prince?" "The Scion was on a ritual journey," Vrethel continued, "a sacred trial that all heirs must complete alone. But enemies of our people attacked and left the Scion to die on this cold world." The commander's voice grew deeper, filled with emotion that Marcus had not expected from such an imposing being. "Our Scion would have perished," Vrethel said, "frozen and forgotten on a world far from home. But you found the heir in the darkness, and you gave warmth without asking anything in return." Governor Vasquez stepped forward, her fear giving way to confusion. "Are you saying," she asked carefully, "that this boy saved someone important to you, and you came here with 100 warriors to do what exactly?" Vrethel turned those gleaming eyes to the governor, and when the commander spoke, there was something almost like joy in the alien voice. "We came to serve," Vrethel declared, and the words echoed across the plain like thunder. The 100 warriors behind the commander all dropped to one knee in perfect unison, bowing their heads to Marcus. "This boy has invoked the Kelthoran," Vrethel explained, "the sacred debt of life that is the highest honor in our culture, a debt that can never truly be repaid." Marcus felt dizzy, struggling to process what he was hearing. "He gave warmth to a stranger in the cold," Vrethel continued, "not knowing who the Scion was, not expecting reward or recognition, asking nothing in return for his kindness." The commander placed a massive hand over its chest in a gesture that somehow looked like a salute. "In 10,000 years of traveling among the stars," Vrethel said, "we have never encountered such pure selflessness, such simple and honest compassion, and our code demands that we honor it." "What does that mean?" Marcus asked, finally finding his voice. "What are you going to do?" "The Obsidian Guard will serve the debt-bearer," Vrethel answered. "We will protect you and your family and your people until the debt is paid. which according to our sacred laws means forever. The colonists who had been watching from behind the gates began to murmur in confusion and amazement. 100 of the most deadly warriors in the galaxy, servants to a 12-year-old boy because he had given a blanket to someone who was cold. Governor Vasquez looked at Marcus with new eyes, seeing not just a child from a struggling colony, but someone who had accidentally changed the course of history. "You really just gave someone a blanket?" she asked quietly. Marcus nodded, still unable to fully grasp what was happening. "It was my father's blanket," he said, "the one he gave me before he died, and I could not just let someone freeze when I had a way to help." Rethal made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been something else entirely. "This is what makes humans so remarkable," the commander said. "You give away your most precious possessions to strangers. You risk yourselves for beings you do not know. You show kindness without calculation or expectation." The commander gestured to the warriors behind. "We have conquered worlds and defeated empires," Rethal said. "We have fought battles that shook the foundations of galaxies. But we have never encountered anything as powerful as the simple act of a child sharing warmth with someone in need." Marcus's mother came running through the gates, pushing past the guards who tried to stop her, and she threw her arms around her son, with tears streaming down her face. "I thought they were going to hurt you," she sobbed. "I thought I was going to lose you." Marcus held his mother tight, feeling the warmth of her embrace mixing with the warmth of the mark on his palm. "It is okay," he told her gently. "They are not enemies. They are friends." Commander Vrethea watched the mother and son with something that looked almost like tenderness in those alien eyes. "The Deathbearer's family is now under our protection as well," the commander announced. "No harm will ever come to them while a single member of the Obsidian Guard still draws breath." Governor Vasquez stepped forward with a question forming on her lips. "This is all very overwhelming," she said. "And I think I speak for everyone when I say we never expected anything like this. But what happens now?" Rethal straightened to full height and spread those magnificent crystalline wings. "Now," the commander said, "we stay and we wait and we serve, for however long the Deathbearer and his people will have us." Marcus looked at the 100 kneeling warriors, at their gleaming armor and deadly weapons, at the incredible power that had come to this small colony, because he had chosen kindness over fear. He did not know what the future would hold, but he knew one thing for certain. His father had been right all along. Help comes first, and questions come later, because the universe has enough people who walk away from suffering. A week had passed since the Obsidian Guard arrived on Vexor 7, and life in the colony had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The Kethrali warriors had set up a camp outside the colony walls, their crystalline tents rising from the rocky ground like strange flowers blooming in an impossible garden. And the colonists had slowly begun to accept that these fearsome beings meant them no harm. Marcus visited the camp every day after school, sitting with Commander Vrethel and learning about the Kethrali people and their ancient civilization that had existed for longer than humanity had walked upright on Earth. He learned that the Kethrali valued honor above all things, that their society was built on codes of conduct so strict that breaking them meant exile or death, and that the Kelthoran was the most sacred of all their traditions. "You must understand," Vrethel explained during one of their conversations. "Kindness without expectation is rare in the universe. Most species give only when they know they will receive something in return." Marcus listened carefully, trying to understand why something so simple had meant so much to these powerful beings. "But humans do this all the time," he said, thinking about the neighbors who had helped his family after his father died. "We help each other because it is the right thing to do." Vrethal made that strange sound that Marcus had come to recognize as laughter. "This is exactly what makes your species so fascinating," the commander said. "You think kindness is ordinary, when to the rest of the galaxy, It is almost impossible to comprehend. The peaceful days could not last forever. On the 8th day, after the Cathrali arrival, the colony's long-range sensors detected something that made Governor Vasquez's face go pale with fear. Ships were approaching Vector 7, not 100 but more than 500, and they were not flying the crystalline banners of the Cathrali Empire. Vrethel examined the sensor data with those multifaceted eyes, and then spoke a word that sounded like a curse in the clicking Cathrali language. "The Dominion of Scar," the commander said grimly. "Our oldest and most deadly enemies." Governor Vasquez demanded an explanation, her voice sharp with barely controlled panic. "Who are they, and what do they want?" she asked. Vrethel's wings folded tight against the commander's back, a gesture that Marcus had learned meant anger or distress. "The Scar are conquerors," Vrethel explained. "They have wanted to destroy the Cathrali for thousands of years, and now they see an opportunity they cannot resist." The commander turned to face the gathered humans with eyes that burned with cold fire. "Word of the Kelthoran has spread across the galaxy," Vrethel said. "The Scar know that the Obsidian Guard is here, bound by sacred oath to protect the Debt-Bearer, and they have come to destroy us all." Marcus felt his stomach clench with fear as he realized what this meant. "They are coming because of me," he whispered. "If I had not helped the Scion, none of this would be happening." Vrethel knelt before the boy, bringing those alien eyes level with his own. "Do not think that way," the commander said firmly. "You did what was right and good, and the evil that approaches is not your fault but the fault of those who choose cruelty over compassion." Governor Vasquez was already issuing orders, preparing the colony for evacuation to the underground bunkers that had been built for emergencies like this. "How long do we have?" she asked Vrethel. "Less than 6 hours," the commander replied. "And I will not lie to you. The odds are not in our favor. 100 warriors against 500 ships. The math was simple and terrible." "We will hold them as long as we can," Vrethel said. "The Obsidian Guard has never retreated from battle, and we will not start now, but you must get your people to safety." Marcus watched as the colony erupted into controlled chaos, families gathering essential supplies and moving toward the shelter entrances, his mother calling for him to come and help. But he could not just walk away. "What if we helped?" Marcus asked suddenly, the words coming out before he could stop them. Vrethel looked at him with surprise. "Helped how?" the commander asked. "Your people have no weapons that could harm Scar warships. No training in combat, no experience in war." Marcus thought about everything he had learned in his short life, about the ways the colonists had survived on this harsh world, through cooperation and creativity and refusing to give up. "We cannot fight," he admitted, "but there must be something we can do, some way we can support you." Governor Vasquez had been listening to this exchange, and now she stepped forward with a thoughtful expression on her face. "The boy has a point," she said slowly. "We may not be warriors, but we are not helpless either." Vrethel seemed confused by this, tilting that great head to one side. "What are you proposing?" the commander asked. The governor looked around at her people, at the scared but determined faces of men and women and children who had crossed the stars to build a new home. "Your warriors will need medical attention when they are wounded," she said. "Our doctors can learn Cathrali biology. Your ships and weapons will need repairs," she continued. "Our mechanics and engineers can help maintain them. Your soldiers will need food and rest," she added. "We can provide shelter and support." Vrethel stood very still, processing this offer that no species had ever made before. "You would risk yourself for us?" the commander asked, genuine wonder in that alien voice. Marcus stepped forward and placed his small hand on Vrethel's armored arm. "You came here to protect me because I helped one of your people," he said. "How can we do anything less than help you in return?" The commander made a sound that was half laugh and half sob. a noise of such pure emotion that it made Marcus's eyes sting with tears. "In all my centuries of life," Vrethel said quietly, "I have never encountered a species like yours. You give and give and give without counting the cost." The governor was already organizing volunteers, calling out for doctors and nurses, for mechanics and engineers, for anyone who had skills that might be useful in the coming battle. To her amazement, almost everyone stepped forward. Mothers with babies in their arms offered to cook and clean. Elderly men with trembling hands offered to help carry supplies. Children barely older than Marcus offered to run messages and fetch water. The colony of New Helsinki, struggling survivors on a hostile world, had decided to stand beside the warriors who had come to protect them. Vrethel watched this display with something like awe in those multifaceted eyes. "Perhaps we underestimated what it means to be human," the commander said softly. Marcus looked up at the sky where doom was approaching, and he felt afraid but also strangely proud. His father had always said that the measure of a person was not what they did when things were easy, but what they did when things were hard. Today, the people of Vexor 7 would show the galaxy what humans were made of. "We need to start preparing," he said to Vrethel. "There is a lot of work to do and not much time." The commander nodded and began issuing orders to the Obsidian Guard, while Governor Vasquez did the same for the colonists. Two species working together, warriors and farmers, aliens and humans, all preparing to face an enemy that wanted to destroy them both. Marcus ran to help where he could, his heart full of fear but also full of hope, because he had learned something important in the past few days. Kindness was not weakness. Kindness was the most powerful force in the universe, capable of turning enemies into friends and strangers into family. And today, they would see just how far that power could reach. The wind cut through the colony like a frozen blade, and Marcus Chen pulled his worn jacket tighter around his thin shoulders as he walked between the storage units behind his family's small home on Vexor 7. He was 12 years old, small for his age, with dark hair that fell into his eyes and hands that were rough from working the hydroponic farms every day after school ended. And tonight his mother had sent him to check the backup power generator because the temperature had dropped far below normal levels, even for this harsh world. The colony of New Helsinki had struggled to survive for 3 long years since the terraforming equipment had broken down. And every winter brought new challenges that tested the humans who had traveled so far from Earth to build a new life among the stars. But they were tough people who refused to give up no matter how hard things became. Marcus reached the generator shed and found everything working properly. The soft hum of the machinery telling him that their home would stay warm through the night. But as he turned to walk back, he heard something strange coming from behind the largest storage container. It was a sound unlike anything he had ever heard before. A clicking and chittering noise mixed with what sounded almost like crying. And despite every warning his mother had given him about being careful in the dark, he found his feet carrying him toward the sound. What he found made him freeze in place with his heart pounding in his chest. A creature huddled against the metal wall of the container, and it was clearly not from Earth or any world humans had colonized. With a body covered in dark chitinous plates that reflected the dim light from the colony's emergency lamps, and wings made of something that looked like living crystal folded tight against its back. The creature was small, perhaps the size of a large dog, and it was shaking violently in the cold air, its multifaceted eyes looking up at Marcus with an expression that somehow crossed all the barriers between species to communicate pure fear and pain. Marcus could see dark fluid leaking from wounds on the creature's side, and frost had begun to form on its crystalline wings. And he knew without being told that this being would die if it stayed out here much longer in this terrible cold. Every lesson he had learned told him to run and tell the adults, to let the colony security forces handle this unknown alien that could be dangerous or diseased, or part of some threat they did not understand. But Marcus could not make himself move away from those eyes that begged him silently for help. He thought about his father, who had died 2 years ago when a mining accident had collapsed a tunnel on the far side of the colony. And he remembered what his father had always told him about being a good person, even when it was hard and scary. "Help comes first," his father used to say, "and questions come later, because the universe has enough people who walk away from suffering." Marcus made his decision in that moment and turned to run back to his house, not away from the creature, but to get something that might save its life. He burst through the door, and his mother looked up from the small kitchen, where she was preparing their evening meal, with a surprised expression on her tired face. "Marcus, what is wrong?" she asked, but he was already moving past her to his small bedroom, where he kept his most precious possession. The thermal blanket had been a gift from his father on his 10th birthday. A special kind of blanket made with technology that could keep a person warm even in the coldest conditions. And Marcus had slept under it every night since his father had passed away, because it made him feel close to the man he missed so much. He grabbed the blanket and also took a container of water and some of the protein bars that the colony gave to all families for emergency nutrition. And he stuffed everything into his bag before running back toward the door. "I will be right back," he called to his mother, who was now standing with concern written across her face. "I just need to check something outside." Before she could stop him or ask more questions, he was gone into the cold night, running back to the storage containers where the strange creature waited. The alien had not moved when Marcus returned, and for a terrible moment, he thought he was too late. But then those crystalline eyes opened and looked at him with something that might have been confusion or fear or hope. Marcus moved slowly and carefully, keeping his hands visible and his voice soft as he approached the wounded being. "It is okay," he said gently, even though he knew the creature probably could not understand his words. "I am not going to hurt you, I promise. I just want to help you get warm." He unfolded the thermal blanket and draped it carefully over the shivering creature, making sure to cover the frost-damaged wings without touching them directly. And he felt the alien flinch at his approach, but then relax as the warmth began to seep into its body. Marcus set the water and food beside the creature and then sat down a few feet away, close enough to show he meant no harm, but far enough to give the being some space. "My name is Marcus," he said softly, watching as the shaking slowly began to ease as the blanket did its work. "I do not know who you are or where you came from, but you are safe here, at least for tonight." The creature's eyes never left his face, and Marcus felt like he was being studied and measured and judged by an intelligence far older and stranger than anything he had encountered before. They sat together in the cold night, the human boy and the alien stranger, and Marcus talked quietly about nothing important, just to fill the silence with friendly sounds. He told the creature about his school and his friends and the funny things that happened in the hydroponic gardens. And he talked about his mother, who worked so hard to keep them fed and safe. And he even talked about his father and how much he missed him. The creature listened without moving, its breathing becoming steadier as the warmth from the blanket filled its body. And at some point in the long hours of the night, Marcus felt his own eyes growing heavy. He woke with a start when the first light of dawn began to paint the sky in shades of pink and orange, and he scrambled to his feet to check on the alien. But the space behind the storage container was empty. The creature was gone, vanished into the early morning as if it had never been there at all. And Marcus felt a strange sadness fill his chest at the thought that he would never know if the being had survived or where it had gone. Then he noticed something that made his breath catch in his throat. His thermal blanket lay on the ground, folded with a precision and care that no human hands could have managed, each corner perfectly aligned, and the whole thing looking almost like a work of art. Marcus picked up the blanket and held it close, and he smiled despite the cold wind that still blew across the colony. Wherever that creature had gone, it had taken the time to say thank you in the only way it could. And somehow that small gesture meant more to Marcus than any words could have expressed. He walked home with the blanket under his arm and hope in his heart, never suspecting that his simple act of kindness had set events in motion that would change not just his life, but the future of his entire species. His mother asked where he had been all night, and he told her he had fallen asleep checking the generator, and she scolded him gently but with love in her eyes. Life in the colony continued as it always had, hard and cold and full of small struggles. But Marcus carried a secret warmth inside him that no winter could ever take away. 3 weeks passed on Vector 7, and Marcus tried to forget about the strange creature he had helped on that cold night. But something inside him had changed in ways he could not understand or explain. He went to school and worked in the gardens and helped his mother around their small home, doing all the normal things a 12-year-old boy should do. But his dreams had become strange and vivid and filled with images that made no sense to his waking mind. Every night when he closed his eyes, he found himself floating through vast spaces filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with inner light. And he heard music that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, haunting melodies that made his heart ache with emotions he could not name. He saw the creature he had saved, but it was different now, standing tall and proud in chambers made of living crystal, surrounded by others of its kind who bowed their heads in respect. Marcus watched as the creature spoke to assembled crowds of its people, and though he could not understand the clicking language they used, he somehow knew they were talking about him, about the small human boy who had given warmth to a stranger in the cold. On the morning of the 22nd day after that fateful night, Marcus woke up with a burning sensation in his right palm, and when he looked down, he saw something that made him cry out in shock. A mark had appeared on his skin, an intricate pattern of lines and curves that glowed with soft blue light, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. He tried to wash it off, but the mark would not fade. And he tried to cover it with bandages, but the light shone through the fabric. And finally he just pulled his sleeve down over his hand and hoped that no one would notice. His mother noticed almost immediately. "Marcus, what is wrong with your hand?" She asked at breakfast, her sharp eyes missing nothing despite her tired face. "Nothing," he lied, hiding his palm under the table. "I just bumped it yesterday and it is a little sore." She did not believe him. He could see that clearly in her expression. But she let the matter drop because there was always so much work to be done and so little time to worry about small things. Marcus went to school with his hand hidden in his pocket, feeling the gentle warmth of the mark against his skin, wondering what it meant and whether it would ever go away. The answer came that afternoon, when the colony's warning sirens began to wail across New Helsinki like the screams of dying animals. Everyone rushed out of buildings and homes to look up at the sky, and what they saw made even the bravest among them feel fear creeping into their hearts. Ships were descending through the clouds, not one or two, but dozens upon dozens of vessels moving in perfect formation, their hulls dark and angular, and covered with symbols that no human could read. Governor Elena Vasquez, a tall woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many crises in her years of leadership, ordered everyone to remain calm, even as her own hands trembled at her sides. The colony's defense force scrambled 3 small patrol craft, ancient ships that had been old when they left Earth and were practically antiques now, and everyone knew they would be useless against an invasion of this scale. Marcus stood with his mother in the crowd that gathered near the central plaza, watching the alien ships land on the plains outside the colony walls, and he felt the mark on his palm burning hotter than before. "What do they want?" Someone shouted, and the question rippled through the crowd like a wave of terror. The answer came minutes later, when a transmission crackled through every speaker and communication device in the colony. The voice was strange, translated through some kind of technology into words that humans could understand. But the meaning was clear despite the mechanical tone. "We seek the one who bears the death mark," the voice said, and Marcus felt his blood turn to ice in his veins. "Bring us the one who showed kindness to the Scion, and no harm will come to your people." The crowd erupted in confused shouting, people asking what a death mark was and who the Scion might be, and what any of this had to do with their small colony. Governor Vasquez called for silence and then asked a question everyone was thinking. "Who among us bears this mark you speak of?" She demanded through the communication system, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "And what do you want with them?" The answer made Marcus's stomach drop. "The mark glows with the light of the Kelthoran," the alien voice replied. "It cannot be hidden or denied, and the one who bears it knows exactly who they are." Every eye in the crowd began the search, looking at neighbors and friends and family members, trying to find the person who had brought this danger to their colony. Marcus felt his mother's hand tighten on his shoulder, and he looked up to see her staring at his right hand where the glow of the mark was visible, even through the fabric of his sleeve. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice filled with terror and confusion. "What have you done?" He could not answer her, could not explain what had happened 3 weeks ago, could not find the words to tell her about the cold night and the wounded creature and the blanket he had given away. The crowd was getting louder now, fear turning to anger as people demanded that whoever had the mark should come forward and face the consequences of their actions. Marcus knew he had to make a choice. He could hide, could pretend he knew nothing, could let the colony face whatever punishment these aliens might deliver, but that was not who he was, and not who his father had raised him to be. He stepped forward, pulling back his sleeve to reveal the glowing mark on his palm, and the crowd around him gasped and pulled away as if he had suddenly become something dangerous and strange. "It is me," he said, his voice small but steady. "I am the one you are looking for." His mother tried to grab him, tried to pull him back into the safety of the crowd, but Marcus gently pulled away from her grasp. "I have to go," he told her, seeing tears streaming down her face. "I do not know what is going to happen, but I have to face this." Governor Vasquez approached him with an expression that mixed suspicion with something that might have been respect. "What did you do, boy?" she asked quietly. "What could a child have done to bring 100 ships to our world?" Marcus looked at the mark on his hand, at the beautiful pattern that pulsed with light like a living thing. "I gave someone a blanket," he said simply. "I found someone cold and hurt, and I helped them." The governor stared at him for a long moment, trying to understand how such a simple act could have led to all of this. "Then let us go see what they want," she finally said, and together they walked toward the colony gates where the alien ships waited. Marcus did not look back at his mother, because he knew if he did, he might lose his courage. And whatever waited for him beyond those gates, he would face it with his head held high. The mark on his palm grew warmer with every step, and somewhere in the depths of his strange new dreams, he heard a voice whisper words that filled him with hope. "The debt bearer comes," the voice said, "and the Kelthoran will be honored."